Welcome to Staging the Third Act. I'm your host, Janine Escalier-Cato, and I know it's been a while since I've done a show, but I'm excited to show you the release of my book, BJ's Promise: How My Dying Dog Found My True Love. Been working on this book. It's available on Amazon. And we boomers, this show is dedicated to boomers who are not leaving their legacy on to their children or grandchildren because we're childless. So we are leaving our legacy to the universe through our art. And that's what this show is all about. And I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest today, Sands Hall, and I have to read all of her accolades because I can't keep it in my head. She's an actress, writer, playwright, musician, singer, director, dancer, and teacher. She has an incredible past. She's done amazing things, and I'm just so thrilled to have her here. But before I bring you on, Sands, I want to read a couple quotes that remind me of you.
Lovely.
And after I got to know you, I thought, I've got to find some quotes to jumpstart this show. And the meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. Pablo Picasso. And I found that because when I got to know you and you were thinking, oh my gosh, what is my purpose? I've done so many things and I haven't really thought about what it is that I want to leave. And I thought, oh my gosh, you have so much that you have to leave. So I thought of that. And then we have art. And then, before I give you the next quote, you were saying that in the realm of what's going on today in the world, it's so hard for artists to, get themselves back up to their joy because of what's going on in the world. It's so divided. But I found this from Nietzsche. We have art so that we will not die of reality.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So I titled this show today, Consciousness is Care, because you quoted that to me. When we were talking, when you said, consciousness is care, I went, that's the name of our show.
Beautiful.
So I just want to say those reminded me of you because you're always giving your gift through your art. And I know that's the legacy you're going to leave. So without further ado, I want you to talk a little bit about your background and why art is more important now than ever.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
The thing, I suppose, would be that, in fact, I wake most mornings with my cat still, slumbering, and sit in my bed and do a bit of a morning meditation where really the prayer is to give out into the world with my purpose. So I feel that that's something that really thrums through my every waking moment to some degree. Obviously that just sounds a little heavy duty, but even driving down here talking to wonderful Philip Jacques, we were talking about how he was retired, how he'd gotten this particular job, and it was like he was, retired. It was like, and we laughed together and said, like, what am I supposed to do with my life? And so that idea of waking up with a purpose of what it is this day is about is so incredibly important to me. And I think that is a dividing line between getting on with life and stumbling and feeling sad and feeling joy, and that thing of waking up and it's hard to get out of bed. It's like I have something I'm doing today. And I suppose that having as many art forms as I do, while sometimes I can bemoan the fact that, and I sometimes do, that if I'd only stuck with singing and songwriting, would I have, a bigger career? Or if I'd only done my writing, would I have? But in the end, that's just not how I'm built.
Right.
And I'm very happy with the place I'm in my life right now.
Yes.
So to get to your question, I was very lucky to be brought up by two wonderful humans, one of whom was an artist. My father was a writer. Well, my mother was an artist too, but she very much devoted her life to my dad's art and to making, she had some wonderful statements, and among them were, I think this often, make every day a poem.
Oh, that's
beautiful. So she just had a wonderful attitude towards everything, and she had parties. She brought great joy, and I think I've inherited a lot of that impulse.
Don't we?
Let me have the gathering, let me do the thing, let me bring the people together.
I love that.
So I was very fortunate in that. My brother once said to my mother about that. She said, "Some days are just doggerel." you know, which
What a
is
great
true. Some
word.
days are just doggerel, you know.
What a
Not
great
every
word.
day is a sonnet,
No
right?
wonder you're a writer.
So that I was very fortunate in that, and then I was I mean, we talked about this. I was incredibly lucky in the fact that all of us as children were encouraged towards the arts.
Yes.
And when I decided to move in that direction, I had many friends whose parents were just aghast. You know, oh my God, you're going to go to acting school? You don't have to go to school to learn to act. I mean, really, you know, incredibly intense things. And my parents were always, yes, 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 that's, you know, that is a well-lived life, is an artistic life. So I feel very fortunate in that. I also grew up in a valley now called Olympic Valley, whose name was changed from the name of an Indian woman. We've shifted that.
Good.
And I was very, very fortunate to grow up there. And like having parents who encouraged you in the arts, I didn't know that having a national forest as your backyard was unusual, you know?
Wow.
That I just grew up in that kind
Sure.
of territory. So much that's fortunate there. And I take my, I feel, as life goes on, incredibly moved and touched and grateful that was indeed, you know, how I grew up in the world in which the ether in which
Yes.
I breathed.
Yes. So then, okay, so how did you get into acting?
That just was something. No, it was funny. Everybody said, you know, you're so emotional, which
That helps.
ties to something that I hope we can get to later. You're so
That
emotional, you
helps.
should be an actor. I find sometimes in a crossword puzzle that it'll say something really negative about an actor, and the answer to the clue will be emote. There is something about that bothers me a little bit because there's so much more than that to acting.
Sure.
But I think from the get-go, Janine, there was something about occupying someone else's perspective, which also we do when we write, of course,
Absolutely.
often, not always, but often, that there was something about being able to articulate which often, you know, for better or for worse, when we are writing, when we are acting, one of the things that we have to have is tension. And how you create tension is someone wants something and someone wants something else. And that tussle is why we go to movies, why we go
Exactly.
to plays, why we read.
We have to have that in our writing, too.
Why we even watch the news. You know, it's like that adrenaline rush, which we spend our life with our little meditations and our drinking of our chamomile tea or whatever, trying to calm that. But what
But
we
you're right.
really want is tension.
Absolutely.
So I think there was something in that was always very interesting to me.
Mhm.
And that it started with writing. I mean, it started with being an actor, but it very quickly also moved to writing. And amongst the things that was hard with writing is that you don't really want to create tension, you know. You want this lovely, like sometimes I teach a little group called Wild Writing Wednesday, which a group of people gather around my table and I just give prompts and you can poetry or prose. And, you know, amongst the things that I just love is throwing out that a prompt, and we look in a poem often for here's the beginning of the poem, but there's a turn at the end. It takes
Exactly.
us in an unexpected place, and
That's
verse.
what makes good writing
It's
as well.
in general, and
In
the word
general,
verse
yeah.
actually means it comes from versus, which was when you moved the plow back and forth, you know, which is a wonderful thing. And
Right.
I read a wonderful Sharon Olds poem aloud the other day, which was about that she was talking, it was an ode, her legs ode. She was an ode to her legs because she'd had to have a knee or a thigh or something replaced, and she wasn't supposed to cross her legs anymore, and how she was having such trouble with not flailing her legs around because. And that poem at the end became about how her mother couldn't beat her anymore once
Wow.
she
Talk about taking a
and it
turn.
was like, you know.
So
but-
your life has always taken those turns.
Oh yes, it's true.
So where did you study your acting?
Well, I started. I went to in high school. I went to Newport Harbor High School, where I got a little bit interested. But where it really began was I got to University of California, Irvine. And my brother, who's a very important person in my life, he's dead now, alas, but had also gone into the theater department there. And I think I just kind of followed him because he was just such a lodestar to me. But I had great training and wonderful opportunities there. Then I went to the American Conservatory Theater's Advanced Training Program. That's a big
Wow.
mouthful in San Francisco.
That's a great place.
And
I know people
subsequently-
through there.
Yes, that's right. We talked about that.
Yeah.
In subsequent years, they actually turned that into an MFA. But at the time that I went through it, it was just a 2-year, just very intensive acting program. And they started with 50 people in the first year and it went down to 25 in the second year. So it was the second year was
Wow.
really a big deal to get into. And from there, I went to train to the Colorado Shakespeare Festival for a summer. And then I went to New York, which I called kind of an MFA program because
Oh, yes.
it's such an intense thing.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
and then eventually I got a little bit of I had a lovely summer at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival
Wow, what an
where I got to play
experience.
Cordelia and King Lear, amongst others. And then my brother and his friends were starting a theater company in upstate New York. So that became a focus.
Wow.
And then I got whatever, my brother had a terrible accident and that was really horrible. So I fled New York and went to LA and promptly got into Scientology.
Wow, another turn.
Yes,
There
another
you go.
turn.
You're going along.
Yep.
Whoop, and then whoop, and
Yep.
then whoop.
And that really took up a lot of time and attention and dreadfulness. And then, but good friends. And then off I went because why not? I applied to the Iowa Writers
And that's
Workshop.
one of the best
And to
in the
my
country.
utter shock, was accepted. To my utter shock. But I remember getting that envelope, and it was really, really, like there was clearly only one page in it, and I didn't know what that meant. Like, was that going to be
Good or
no
bad?
or bad? And I opened it up, I remember sinking down on the couch because I knew it would change everything, and that it would be my vehicle to get out, ultimately, of Scientology as what her. So that was another turn, you're quite right.
Jeez.
Yes, and then off to Vermont for a romantic experiment that blew up, and then through a wonderful series of circumstances came to Nevada City, where I live now, and got into really wonderful work with the theater company. But then realized, well, you can't make a living, so then I applied to become a 1-year visiting professor at Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow.
And to my utter shock, was accepted to do that. And after, partway through the first year, they came and said, could you stay a second? And partway through the second year, can you stay a third? Which was an incredible,
You must have been
incredible
fantastic. You
honor.
taught creative writing, right?
And then after that, I got to teach English courses, and one of my favorites that I concocted was Introduction to Myth and Fairy Tale.
Ooh.
And that was really fun because I got to just be an autodidact, just teach myself what I didn't know and go down rabbit holes that interested me. So that was really a marvelous thing. And then I realized, well, maybe that's enough of that, and I missed being home. I mean, they gave me an amazing schedule. What an incredible decade that was. So I came back home I retired and came back home right in time for the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then that opened up. I'd never taught on Zoom, but all of a sudden Zoom classes are so popular, and I was very busy and very happy teaching on Zoom. I kept my classes really small so that 9 people could fit on a single screen, and that really was a wonderful
I took writing
time.
classes on Zoom from a teacher from New York.
Yes, you see, that was the thing. I had people. My current class I'm teaching right now. It's New York, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Grass Valley, and Mill Valley.
Wow.
So that's really fun when you can gather, as long as
Yeah.
everybody gets the time period,
Right.
the time zone right.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah.
so that's sort of the zooming through
Yes.
the various things.
And it was
of my life.
interesting when I first asked you what your legacy was, and you were just like, well,
Oh, I was going to cornerstones. I was going to, meteors. I
Yeah.
was going to,
Yes.
what's going to be on this planet?
Yeah.
So I went to a much, well, welcome to my mind.
Yeah.
I went to a much larger place than what you were actually asking. Yeah.
And I have to tell you, when I was a freshman in college, we were asked what was our philosophy of life.
Wow.
And I went to the gods and
Right.
heaven and religions
Right.
and all this. And when we turned them in, the professor came back with our papers, and she said, I want Julie to come up and read her paper because you all got it wrong. And Julie, this beautiful African American girl, got up and she said, "My philosophy of life is to be a good person." And then she went on to talk about what she wanted out of her own life. She said, "What's with all these religious papers?" And when you were talking, I went, "Oh, I better clarify what I mean."
Because it was really funny. And it was depressing as all get out, too. It was a terrible launch to what became a wonderful conversation.
And I thought, "Oh, no, Sam, it's not about, the star you're going to leave in the heavens, but you as a human being."
Right.
What is it? Because we haven't had children or grandchildren, and that's where most people feel like they're going to move on through their children and grandchildren. But the people we've affected personally.
Right.
And when I heard all the things that you've done, I went, "Oh my gosh, she's left her gifts here, she's left her gifts there, she's left her gifts here." And I think when we start to look at how we've left our gifts through the people we've left,
Oh, so huge.
and they're going to remember us. "Oh, I remember when Miss Cotto told me this," or "I remember when Mrs. Cotto gave me this," and I'm going to leave it through my students. I know that.
Yes, exactly.
And so that's what I mean about how we don't have to have children or grandchildren to leave the essence of who we are.
I mean, you have to once you've reached a certain age, you have to make peace with that or else.
Or else.
Right.
Or
Right,
else.
yeah. I mean, just because I saw this on your wall, I just love that you had an ex-student who wrote to you, Mrs. Cato, "So your life of molding others is behind, engaging in thoughts and opening minds. Nothing is ever left behind. Beautiful thoughts and words so kind live on in all of our collective minds. Through trying times so unkind, you gave us sight while we were blind." What a beautiful thing to have on your wall,
I know.
really, Janine.
Thank you, Brian.
It's absolutely so beautiful, too, It's just lovely. So, anyway, I agree. And the thing is, you don't know. Sometimes they get in touch and tell you.
They do, and sometimes,
you have no idea. Sometimes years and years and years go by, and you get, someone comes up to you at a reading and says, I was in a class of yours, and blah, 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 and you said this, and blah, 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 or you get the book that they were working on in a workshop and with you, a decade and a half ago, and then they send you a copy. And it's nice when your name is listed in the acknowledgments, but even just a knowledge that you've done something like that is truly important, or move somebody with a song you've sung, or,
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
and you, in our conversation, you wrote a book, and I'm going to order it. I can't wait to read it. But you had mentioned that you ordered a book about the Anasazi Indians. Mm-hmm. And is that in Arizona?
Well, the Anasazi were, of course, way before states existed.
But that area
was basically what we call Four Corners.
Okay.
So it's Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona. So
you wrote,
Colorado,
and when you said, "I always wanted to know what happened to the Anasazi," and I went, "Oh my God, my mother always said that." She visited there, and she just... To this day, she's 93, and she'll say, it'll come up, and she'll say, "I still wonder what happened." And you wrote that book, and I went, "Oh my gosh, I have to order that book."
Yeah.
I have to order it. And
this is my book, Catching Heaven, and the idea of that was that there's a gentleman, there's a character in the book that says to one of the POV characters, "You've got to catch heaven on the fly," which is like, it's now. That idea. And there's 3 narrators in that book, 3 points of view, and one of them, particularly sort of the major character, she's just struggling. She's childless, and she's really struggling with the fact that she probably won't have children, and she's got a sister with children, and it's like,
I can't
this
wait.
Thing. And so that's her big lesson in the thing is, catching heaven on the fly.
You didn't bring it, and at the end of this, everyone at the end, she's going to show her books so you can see the things she's written. But what is the name of that?
Catching Heaven.
Catching Heaven by Sands Hall.
And what happened is I was in the Church of Scientology, church/cult, and I would often go to the Southwest to visit my sister, who did indeed have 3 kids. And I would stay with her and also another dear friend, Dana, near Durango. And I would journey out to Chaco Canyon and all these places into the Mesa Verde, all these places where the Anasazi had once lived, and the whole mystery of why they'd created their the cliff dwellings and why they went up there and all this stuff that was just fascinating. And then why were they so afraid that they had created this place of retirement, of being able to get away from something, it felt like.
Mm-hmm.
And was it the drought? There were so many theories. So yeah, eventually that is a line in the book.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that
And,
one of the
but I love
characters.
also this woman who realizes, and she comes to some sort of epiphany,
Mm-hmm.
which
Yes,
is
she does.
which
Yeah.
is exciting
It's
about anybody.
incredibly important, and of course, there's that phrase "chop wood, carry water," and there's an actually terrific newsletter that comes out that tells you who to senators to call about what things that are bothering you. It's called "chop wood, carry water," but it's also a wonderful Buddhist phrase, which basically means pay attention to the task at hand. And especially in Buddhism, it has to do with, even if you're enlightened, whatever the heck that means, even if you're enlightened, the most important thing is, wash the cup, put the cup in the dish drainer, be in this moment now. There is nothing, it doesn't become some big thing.
Yeah.
It's like it's the more and more present we are. And I think we struggle so hard. I think many of us, I'm a little guilty of this. It's like, let's scroll through, the reels on Instagram, or let's have this other thing that's occupying our minds,
Right.
as opposed to, I think that's one of the things about art that's so incredible is like, for those moments when you can really be present with your guitar, be present with your writing, be present with your paintbrush,
I love that.
that it's and time stops. You have a whole different experience of living because you're present to this. And of course with writing especially, words are whirling around.
Sure.
You're coming to the end of the sentence and you're wondering, do I give her torn fishnet stockings, or is she wearing really tight leggings, or is she just wearing jeans? So your mind is working on that, but still you're in the present.
It's like meditation. When I write,
Yes.
sit down and write, maybe 4 hours have gone by and it feels like 2 minutes
Exactly.
because it's like meditation.
Yeah.
And something else that you said that reminded me of something.
Well, meditation, when it goes well, there's all those times in meditation when you go, oh my God, only a minute's passed.
That's funny. That's
I
funny.
mean, really. It's like, I think I've counted at least 7 breaths.
That's great.
Monkey mind, yeah.
But something else you said that struck me, because I've always really grappled with grief and how to get through it. That's a big thing in my life. But I saw, I've always loved George Carlin, and I saw a new documentary on his life, and he and his wife went through hell and back together, but they stayed together through it all. And she was his biggest fan, and he was her biggest fan. And after she died, an interviewer was asking him, how are you getting through this grief? Because she was everything to you through your ups and downs and
Right.
all arounds. And he said, it's like anything. And it was that Buddhist thing. You have to get up and you have to do those things every day.
You do.
And you have to focus on those things that you have to do every day. And then sometimes those memories come and you're just, they just hit you. And but it's like he said, it's in the doing that's what carries you through. And it's that Buddhist thing of stay with the task.
Or just that really good life practice. I understand that when Amy Tan, when celebrity hit her so fast after Joy Luck Club came out, and she was touring and reading and speaking and in such demand, that it's when she got her first little Yorkshire. She's always had 1 or 2 usually at the time. Always called something like Bobo or Bon Bon or something, but they're darling little. And one of the things I think I understand the reason is that there was so much attention being paid to her that she wanted at the end of the day or the beginning of the day to have this thing she needed to do for another. She also has a fabulous husband and they have a great marriage. But I've always appreciated that aspect of the same thing. So it can be grief, or it can be something that's just rattling your world in some way.
Yeah.
What's the task I can do that will
Absolutely.
calm me. It's like grab one thing out of the chaos and make it less chaotic.
Yes.
Be helpful. And I just do want to say that Amy Tan is coming to, she's going to be the key speaker at the Sierra Writers Conference taking place on March 8th at the Sierra College campus in Grass Valley. You can just Google Sierra
wow.
Writers Conference. And I'm really pleased. I get to speak at the beginning of the day.
How exciting.
Yes, and I'm going to speak on the theme, which is ecosystems and how that applies to writing particularly.
Wow.
And then in the afternoon, I'm so thrilled I get to be in conversation. I get to throw a bunch of questions
How
at Amy
exciting.
Tan and talk. And she's got such a great new book out. She has, for a long time, been someone who's been a secret artist, and she's been taking care of birds in her backyard. It is such a delightful book. So anyway, that's something coming forward. I just realized I was talking about Amy Tan. Here she comes soon to our area.
That's
It's
exciting.
going to be really great. Really
Well,
great.
and also with my book, it's a dog that got me through
A
11
dog,
years
see?
of a lot of grief, and I focused on her to get through it all.
Same idea.
Same exact
Absolutely,
idea.
Yes. And
Same exact
don't we all
idea.
feel that with our pets?
Yes.
Oh,
I mean,
Oh.
but you have to have an anchor, and art is an anchor.
yeah, it's an anchor for certain. Sure.
Absolutely, art is an anchor.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think those things can come up for all of us when we don't know. Then our purpose can feel eroded or weak, or as you say, grief comes in, or your wonderful story about George Carlin. Like, what gets you out of bed? What makes you get up and make your bed? That sense of, I'm so depressed that who cares if I leave it rumpled, and all that,
Right.
which is really indicative, I think, of lots of other mental stuff. And I think what's interesting, I've just thought about this a lot, which is writing my memoir, and I'm just going to hold up the
Yes, please do.
cover. It's called Reclaiming My Decade Lost in Scientology.
Oh, that looks fascinating.
I love this particular cover because of the way it pulls the eye in is
Yes.
so good. But I realized that when my brother had that terrible accident and I went to fleed to Los Angeles because I was going to, I don't know, be an actor, of stage and screen or whatever, and pretty promptly found my way to a system that ordered things. That was the thing I found most appealing. That it was
Interesting.
very orderly, and it divided life into extremely,
That makes sense.
it did, right? And it were
Really
very
makes
important
sense.
for me at the time. And I think that's how they get a lot of people.
I'm
Because
sure.
people are often lacking purpose, they're full of grief, they're full of sorrow. In my case,
Right.
my brother
Vulnerable.
basically lobotomized himself by jumping, whatever, off a bridge. He was very, very drunk at the time, and he had such a terrible brain injury that it was like he wasn't himself anymore. So the grief was enormous,
Oh.
right? And I entered into this system of belief, I think because they were so certain they could fix it. And so what I did is make the fixing exterior to myself, rather than, which took me years and frankly writing my memoir to gather, the only person who can really fix it is you. And you can have a sweetheart, you can have a therapist, you can
Absolutely.
have a beloved pet, you can have incredibly dear family and friends, but bottom line, it's only what you can concoct and figure out that makes you look at your life differently.
So you probably woke up and went, "Oh my God, I've given over my life to these people,
Well,
and now I
it
don't
wasn't
know
a
who
wake
I-"
up, it was a very gradual, I've got to get the heck out of here. I didn't understand exactly what I'd done. I only knew that increasingly all I did was cry.
Wow.
And I realized in writing this, I was so depressed. When you think of depressed, it's like this term, but it's really wonderful to think of, it's like someone's pressing down, and that means there's this depression in what's around you. So you
sure.
can't even see that life could be cheerful. I remember, especially after I left Scientology, had nothing to replace it, that I would look around, and when I'd see people sitting at a like over a glass of wine or a cup of coffee laughing, and I'd say, those poor demented people, they've no idea how awful life is. You know, I know. I mean, it was bad.
Brainwashed.
It was bad. Well, no, I think it was just my own inability to see that I had to shift something. And then this thing happened. I was dating a guy, and I was crying again. Crying. And he sat me down and he said, Sands, it is as if what you've done is taken the pointed end of a compass and etched a line in your brain. And you have etched that line to go down to Sarah. You have etched it. So that is every time you start on, especially having to do with having left Scientology and should have left Scientology and oh my God, what my life is going to be about. You have changed your mind to go into this abyss. And you can train your mind not to. I hated him. I hated him because I knew like this that he was absolutely right.
Yeah.
That I did have that capability. And it took some time, but boy, did that create a thing where I realized I have to be responsible. At some point, I can't say it's Scientology,
Right.
it's the current boyfriend, it's the current living situation,
Right.
there's always going to be a problem if you look at it that way.
That's right.
And it just took a while, but that was, in working on the book, it was so great to be able to grab hold of those and realize, oh, that's what I did. I put all of my faith in something outside of myself, rather than
That's fascinating.
where is it inside me?
Yeah.
And although I never did, because both my parents, who thought all medications were bad, you could take a vitamin C, like a cold, and aspirin maybe, and Scientology agreed, so one place where they agreed, that all drugs were bad.
Right.
Cigarette smoking wasn't, and you could have your occasional glass of wine, but Scientology, bad. Not even Novocaine for a tooth extraction. I realized that at least I never actually got into that. And then and this is when these epiphanies really began to come. It was years later. I'd gotten the job at Franklin and Marshall College. My father had died the year before. I was on that campus in a blissful situation, being paid well, getting to teach what I love, surrounded by fabulous colleagues, and I was in a trough. I was so sad, and I knew, and I was like, bad thoughts were coming through, like what's the point, and why am I here? I mean, it was awful. And I went to a wonderful GP. Just details that when I came up to that GP, he lived way out in Lancaster County. I would, as often as not, there'd be an Amish buggy with a horse out front. I just love that. And he was just such a wonderful human, and he always would take the time to really talk. So he asked me, how sometimes a total stranger can ask you something, and you just
the
toss it all up.
floodgates.
And he said to me, there's a pill for that. And I said, it was huge for me. I said, gimme.
Good.
And so I started I was so terrified.
Serotonin in our brains as we age.
Yep.
It's putting back that serotonin.
Well, I didn't know any of that. All I knew was that I wanted this thing that I knew many people were taking in my life. So I started on that, and it did definitely. And here's what I really remember, and it made a huge impression on me. I could feel the emotional swell come at me, the thing that usually would make me go, "Whoa." And it was as if my mind went, nope. And I think partly it's doing so much meditating, I was very conscious of that to some degree, or I could just feel this, but
Been there, done that.
yep. Nope.
I know that
And I
feeling.
began to realize, I forgot after a while to take the pill. And I realized that lesson had landed in my brain, in my mind.
Interesting.
And that I could feel this thing coming at me now, and that I'd been given a tool.
It rerouted that
It
circuit.
rerouted that
it
circuit.
rerouted the circuit.
And, a number of years ago, I was playing with a fabulous musician, Randy McCain, and he plays sax and all kinds of reeds, and he was just a kind of a muse, because I could hear these sounds on my songs. And so we had done a concert, And I went to afterwards and I said, and about, the Sunday in December, and he looked at me and he said, Sands, I can't do this anymore with you. I'm so sorry. I've just got my own bands that I really want to work on. And he's an incredible composer. He does. He works with like 4 or 5 different incredible bands. Well, oh my God. And I went home, just driving home, and came in and fed the cats. Always good to have a little thing to do. And I lay down and I was, ready to just bawl my eyes out. And this thing happened where I was lying there ready for the grief to come. And I thought, Sands, why do this? He'll play with you again in some small thing. He just doesn't want to blah, blah, blah. You're going to be fine. You'll find other people. You've got your music. You've got other things to do. And I got up off the floor and went about my, the rest of my, but that was really big. I realized how much I can take care of. And it's not to dismiss, because I now know depression's a really, 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 really real thing.
I went through the exact same thing as you, and that's why I'm doing this show, because I had to pull myself out. And I didn't rely on my husband to do it.
Right, you can't.
But I lost 2 good friends during COVID, not from COVID, but it just happened the time. And I couldn't pull myself out. I couldn't do it. And I just kept going deeper and deeper and deeper, to where when Glenn walked out the door, I was sure he was going to die.
Yeah, right.
And the anxiety was so intense that all I did is cry, and I just like, what is this? I've never had this before.
Right.
So a friend of mine who is a therapist, she has a PhD in psychology, and she's also a nurse, a psychiatric nurse. She said, why don't you try just a little bit of an antidepressant? So I got to hold my doctor, same exact thing. My brain was rerouted, and then my therapist said, why don't you do something creative? You are such a creator.
Wow.
And that's what I came up with, this finding my tribe. But another thing I want to say about what you and I go through, and my brother, who also is very creative, but I think creative people, right brain people, when we have an abundance of creativity in our brain and that emotion, because we are so emotional, sometimes those emotions get clogged in those circuits. And we really need something to help us open those gates and let those emotions flow freely, because really creative people are most prone to depression. Really, I believe it's a brain thing. I really do.
I also think that sometimes, like I was sitting at a friend's Thanksgiving, this was again, probably 20 years ago, certainly before I tried my own little time with an antidepressant. And everybody at that table, with the exception of me and my then sweetheart, was on an antidepressant. And I remember being really shocked by that, and also understanding, yes, sometimes this is what you just described so well, but sometimes I think it's that simple thing of life is hard.
Yeah.
Life is hard.
It is.
Philip said something in the car when we were driving. It's like you can actually be in a place where you're not sad, but then maybe you also don't get to be joyous either, because there's thing gets tamped. So there's a really interesting trade-off there.
But when your brain is off kilter, everything's magnified to a point where you can't function.
No.
And that's
the real thing.
Yeah.
Because that's the point. It's very real.
It's very real.
Yeah.
I've never experienced something like that more. I just was afraid at every turn of everything. I was afraid of people that I love dying all the time.
All the time.
And then I would project, oh my God, I'm going to die alone. I'm going to die alone. Glenn's going to die. I'm going to die alone. And I just couldn't. It was horrible. It was, never want to go through that again.
And it's right, creativity can help, but just, a project, outwardly bound thing, that's that wonderful story about having an animal, that something takes you outside of yourself.
Right.
Because it's so easy to get into this. So I'm grateful, because there are times when, it's like, okay, today.
Yes.
Right? But that's the thing.
So back to your conversation with Phil and about sometimes life's just hard.
Yeah.
What kind of thing did you guys settle on about that?
Well, it was just something that he articulated, that's, one can take an antidepressant, and I really want to make sure I'm very clear. I think that they're a fantastic tool that we have in our society.
I do too.
I really want to make that really clear. But that sometimes we didn't get this far in the conversation, but my own thought is sometimes what we're doing is trying to take something that might alleviate what simply is difficult about being alive. That there is loss, that there is anxiety, that there is, you know, you've got a purpose, and you've gotten this thing that you're going, you send out a story, and you know, it doesn't get taken, you send it out again, it doesn't get taken. All these things that can, you know, Shakespeare's phrase, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or even fortune, period. And just living is difficult. So I think that's one of the things is, bottom line, it comes, is it your mother? Yes. Yeah, that we were talking about. It's like that there's this incredible joy no matter what.
No matter what. That you can always find.
You can always find that thing. There's always, I guess it comes down to me, my own lesson, and what I found in this was choice.
And by the way, we just got the cue that we have 5 minutes left, so this is your turn, your time, to talk about some of your projects and show your books and talk about your books and show them to the camera so people can get some of your magic.
So one thing I just as Tools of the Writer's Craft, a book I wrote because I was doing a lot of editing at the time, something I don't do as much of, though I have clients sometimes. And I realized I was writing the same thing again and again and again and again in the margins of these manuscripts. Here's how to handle point of view. Here's how to handle what we call sense of place. You know, what can you take on to create this idea of showing rather than telling? So I had lots and lots of ideas that I kept articulating and realized, well, why not put them into a book with some exercises that, or assignments, prompts, if you will, that people could apply. So yeah, it's been really great, and it has a lot of, you know, people say, especially the stuff on point of view is really, really helpful. So I'm glad I did that with my effort, you know, to help people. So that's one of those things when you talk about legacy. I'm really glad it's out in the world. You know, it's nice that it sits doing that work.
Can't wait to get into that one.
Yeah, it's very, very, and this is a gift for you. So there you go. And then the other one that I brought for today is, it's Reclaiming My Decade Lost in Scientology.
That looks interesting too.
This was huge. I didn't know I was writing a memoir when I began. You know, I always scribble to figure stuff out often. And just briefly, I was teaching in the Myth and Fairy Tale course, I was talking about the hero's journey. And because I really wanted my students to understand that they could look at bad parts of life like that, like here you are shoved off base, you're going down into the underworld, you know, and if you can look at that underworld with a different kind of eye, that underworld can be teaching you something. And so this little voice kept saying, well, maybe you could look at your time in Scientology like that. It's like, no, that was just a big error. It was just a big mistake that I made, you know. But again and again, this kind little voice said, maybe. So once I got hold of that, I was able to really find, it's a classic structure for any story, really, right? You want some kind of descent and some kind of rise of some nature, or some kind of descent, rise and some kind of descent, you know. Tragedy versus a comedy. But so that was a really useful arc for this book. And above all, as I was writing it, I just changed how I look at life. That whole conversation we just had, Janine, that's as a result of really looking deeply into, wow, you had really handed over your power, you know, to, in any ever way, shape, and form. Whether it was, you know, the current man in your life, or the, you know, it's embarrassing to admit.
And we've all been there.
So to realize I have a choice, I can make a decision to lie on the floor and cry, or I can make a decision to get up and make myself a cup of tea.
I love that.
And those were, so that really, I just am so grateful for the opportunity to have put this, so much so that I'm really glad it didn't get published earlier than it did, because I tried a number of times. I kept pulling back in and rewriting it till I finally figured out what it was really about. And that was incredible. And also to have come to a place of, if it never got published, that would be fine, because of what I figured out by writing it.
Yes.
You know?
Have you taken it around?
Yes, was out in hardback, and then I got that, and then the paperback was right at the beginning of COVID, so I got a few readings.
Oh, good.
Yes, in LA and San Francisco and here before that set in. But yeah, it's been a wonderful thing, and I've appreciated the people who have written I thought I would be talking to people who were trying to get out of Scientology was really the audience I wanted. The surprise one has been the number of people who've written to say, you have talked about how you had put this limit on you about, you had to live in a certain way or be perfect in a certain way. I did that same thing, and you've shown me I can look at my life in a different way.
See, legacy, right there.
Yeah, those things that go into the file called precious responses. That's that little file.
Your legacy's just all over the place.
Well, thank you. It's been amazing to talk with you, Janine.
Yes,
thank you very
and
much.
I'm just so thrilled I know you.
Thank you, Janine.
Again,
Very
that's
lovely.
my, taking myself out of my depression and putting myself out there to get gifts of people
it's an
back.
incredible story. It's
Yeah.
like it's so parallel what I was
I
talking
know
about.
it. I know. It's a great time to be alive.
And a huge
So-
thanks to our wonderful Philip.
Yes,
too. Yeah.
I couldn't do this show without Philip
It's
Jock.
incredible.
Couldn't do it. He's a wonderful human being and very talented.
Great actor.
Very
also.
talented. So thank you for joining me again for another session of staging the third act, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks for tuning in. Bye bye.